I'm exploring the reasons why we might see a high mean squared error, MSE, when using a PoissonRegressor, a statistical model that's really useful for predicting counts of things. A high MSE tells us our predictions are pretty far off from the actual values. This question asks us to identify the potential problems that could lead to a large MSE. We need to think carefully about what could make our Poisson regression model perform poorly. Let's consider several factors and how they could lead to a bad MSE score. The Poisson distribution assumes a specific relationship between the mean and variance of the data. If our website visit data violates this assumption, perhaps the variance is much higher than the mean, overdispersion, then the Poisson regressor won't be a good fit, and the MSE will suffer. Heteroscedasticity means the variability of our data changes depending on the advertising spend. A Poisson regressor assumes constant variance, which is not the case here. This mismatch will negatively impact the accuracy of our predictions, leading to a high MSE. I've examined all the possible explanations, and I found them all valid. Any of these scenarios could cause a large MSE value. It's really important to remember that several factors could be at play. We could have a bad model fit, inappropriate data distribution, or irrelevant variables all at once. A high MSE is a symptom. These are potential causes. Underfitting happens when the model is too simple to capture the complexities in the data. It's like trying to fit a straight line to a curvy dataset. You'll end up with large errors, increasing the MSE. If the features we use to predict website visits aren't strongly related to the outcome, the model's predictions will be weak, resulting in a large MSE. We need features with a strong connection to what we're predicting. I'm using this data to train my Poisson regression model. It shows how many website visits I get each day. I'm using scikit-learn's PoissonRegressor to predict website visits. It assumes the data follows a Poisson distribution, meaning the variance, spread, equals the mean, average. My model isn't predicting very well. MSE measures the average squared difference between predicted and actual website visits. A high MSE means big prediction errors. Maybe the Poisson distribution isn't a good fit for my data. The Poisson assumption says that the variance equals the mean. If this is false, it could result in a high MSE. Perhaps there is overdispersion. Variance significantly exceeds the mean. This means the variability of my website visits changes depending on how much I spend on advertising. A Poisson model assumes constant variance. This violation could cause a high MSE. My model might be too simple. It can't capture the complexity of the data properly, leading to large errors and a high MSE. Think of it like trying to fit a straight line through a curvy dataset. The line can't follow all the curves well. I might be using features, variables, that aren't actually related to website visits. This would confuse my model and produce inaccurate predictions, leading to a high MSE. I have a high MSE using a Poisson regression model. Let's investigate why. The high MSE may be due to any of the issues outlined above, independently or in combination. Let's find out. I see a high mean squared error, MSE, in your Poisson regression model. That means your model's predictions are pretty far off from the actual values. This isn't necessarily a sign that you did something wrong, but it does mean something needs adjustment. Let's explore why. The Poisson distribution assumes the variance, spread, of your data equals the mean, average. If your website visit data is overdispersed, meaning the variance is much larger than the mean, then the Poisson distribution isn't a good fit. I'd expect a high MSE in this case because the model's underlying assumption is violated. Think of it like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It just won't work perfectly. Your model might be too simple to capture the complex patterns in your data. It's like trying to describe a complex painting with only a few simple brush strokes. You miss the finer details, resulting in big prediction errors, which is reflected in a high MSE. Heteroscedasticity means the variability in your website visits changes depending on your advertising spend. For example, when advertising spend is low, website visits might vary only slightly from day to day, but when advertising is high, the day-to-day variation might be much greater. A Poisson regression assumes constant variance, so this violation can lead to a high MSE because the model's predictions become increasingly unreliable as the advertising spend varies. It's like trying to use one-size-fits-all approach for shoes. Clearly won't work well for everyone. If the features you're using, like maybe the color of the website background, aren't strongly related to website visits, your model won't be able to learn the true relationship between your features and your target variable. This will lead to poor predictions and a high MSE. It's like trying to predict the weather using the phase of the moon. Completely unrelated variables will lead to inaccurate predictions. Let's explore why you might see a high mean squared error, MSE, in your Poisson regression model. A high MSE means your model's predictions are far from the actual website visits. I'll break down several reasons why this happens. The Poisson distribution assumes the mean and variance of the data are equal. If your website visit data shows much more variability than expected based on the average, what we call overdispersion, then the Poisson distribution isn't a good fit. This will lead to a high MSE, because your model is making assumptions that don't match reality. Heteroscedasticity means the variability of your website visits changes depending on how much you spend on advertising. Maybe when spending is low, visits vary only slightly, but when spending is high, visits vary wildly. Poisson regression assumes constant variance, so this violation results in poor model performance and a high MSE. Underfitting means your model is too simple to capture the patterns in your data. It's like trying to fit a straight line to a curvy dataset. The model misses important details, leading to large prediction errors and a high MSE. You could try to make your model more complex to overcome this issue. If the features you're using, like, perhaps, the color of your website's font, aren't truly related to website visits, then your model will struggle to make accurate predictions. These irrelevant features add noise to your model and lead to a high MSE. You need to carefully select features that have a meaningful impact on your target variable. MSE is a measure of how far off your model's predictions are from the actual values. MSE is calculated by averaging the squared differences between predictions and true values. A high MSE simply means your model isn't doing a great job of predicting. It's a signal that you need to investigate the model's assumptions and features. I see a high MSE, which means my model's predictions are way off from the actual website visits. A large MSE tells me that something is wrong with my Poisson regression model. It could be a few things, like my model is too simple, I have the wrong kind of data, or the things I'm using to make predictions aren't very helpful. I'm investigating why my Poisson regression model is giving me a high mean squared error, MSE. I'll need to consider various possible reasons why my model isn't working as expected. I'm checking if the Poisson distribution is a good fit for my website visit data. The Poisson distribution assumes that the variance, spread, is equal to the mean, average. If it's not, maybe the variance is much bigger than the mean, overdispersion, then the Poisson distribution just won't work well. This means my model's assumptions are incorrect, causing a high MSE. I'm looking to see if the variability of my website visits changes depending on the amount spent on advertising. If that's the case, I have heteroscedasticity, and a core assumption of Poisson regression, that the variance is constant, is violated. This would lead to poor predictions and a high MSE. I'm considering if my model is too simple. Maybe it's not complex enough to capture all the patterns in the website visit data. An underfit model will miss important relationships, leading to a high MSE. I'm making sure I'm using the right information. If the things I am using to predict website visits aren't strongly related to the actual number of visits, then the model will have trouble making accurate predictions. This leads to a high MSE. Let's explore why you might see a high mean squared error, MSE, when using a Poisson regressor. A high MSE simply means your model's predictions are far from the actual values. We'll look at several reasons this could happen. It's like trying to hit a target. A high MSE means you're missing by a wide margin. The Poisson distribution assumes the variance, spread, of your data is equal to its mean, average. If your website visit data is overdispersed, meaning the variance is much higher than the mean, then a Poisson model is a poor fit. I would think of it like this. Imagine you're modeling the number of cars passing a certain point. If the average number is 10 but sometimes you see 20 and other times only 2, that's overdispersion, and Poisson is not the best choice. A better distribution might be needed. Underfitting means your model is too simple to capture the patterns in your data. Imagine you're trying to fit a straight line through a curvy cloud of points. You'll get a poor fit, leading to high MSE. Adding more complex features or a more sophisticated model might help improve your predictions. Heteroscedasticity means the variability of your data changes depending on the predictor variable. In your case, the variability of website visits might be different at different levels of advertising spend. Imagine a scatter plot. If the spread of the points around the regression line changes drastically as advertising spend increases, that's heteroscedasticity. Poisson regression assumes constant variance, so this violation causes inaccurate predictions and high MSE. If the features you are using don't have much of a relationship with website visits, then your model won't be very good at predicting them. Think of it like trying to predict the weather using the price of tea. They are not related. This will result in high prediction errors and therefore a high MSE. You need relevant features for good prediction.